I'm Robin Saunders, and I'm a professor in the Cybersecurity department at River Valley Community College in Claremont, New Hampshire. So for me, this is a southern vacation, because I was told that it is 12 degrees at my home this morning, actually minus 12, not 12, so it's a little nippy. And obviously this was a fairly long trip for me, but this was, I mean, the climate here and the weather has just been amazingly awesome. Let me tell you a little bit about how I got into cybersecurity and healthcare in the first place. I'm kind of an odd person out. I'm kind of an odd person anyway. I think we all are as geeks. But I am actually, my undergraduate degree is in medical technology. I'm a registered nurse. I was the director of business process outsourcing for a medical software company known as Purkinje, and we were corporate headquarters in Hyderabad, India. So I ran a billing and coding operation. I've also been a practice manager. I'm a certified practice manager. And then later in life, I went into cybersecurity. So this was a perfect fit for me. It was a wonderful opportunity to look at all of those things that I was so passionate about and to actually be able to make a difference. Now, the program at River Valley Community College was an NSF-funded grant. We were granted our certificate in 2012, and then in 2013, we were allowed to give out the associate degree. So it's a fairly new program. To date, we've graduated about 10 students. We have another 12 coming down the pike. So we are in the process of trying to market the program and make it larger. The reason that we developed this in the first place was that the community college that I work at is primarily allied health. We're obviously in a very rural area. We have about every allied health program you could ever imagine, including something called polysomnography, which is the study of sleep. And this was a perfect fit for this. We did a lot of market research with all of the area hospitals. And when I say area hospitals, it's very unlike the area hospitals here. I mean the entire state of New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, New York adjacent to that, and Maine. So we really, we have a lot of healthcare institutions that are on board for this program. You got sound there? Okay. Now, we're all familiar with healthcare. Turn that off. We are all familiar with the healthcare structure. I guess this isn't working very well. Healthcare is changing before our very eyes. I think most of us have realized that change in terms of the different insurances, consolidations of huge healthcare centers, these mega healthcare entities, and I'm going to be talking about one of them in a few minutes. How healthcare is changing. I mean, most recently, Walmart is going to be opening up some minute clinics to do some primary healthcare. So we have consolidated, we have diversified, we're trying very hard to make sure that healthcare is going to be an economically sound entity for everybody. Patients are demanding more convenient and personal care. I mean, how many of you in your towns have some sort of, I call it a doc in the box. It's an urgent care center that you have 24/7 access to. The CVSs now have them. Nobody else here has that kind of thing? This is an Eastern phenomenon? Yeah, we're decentralizing this. We're making it more convenient. Patients want more personal care. They want to be able to access their own electronic medical record. They want to know what their lab results are. They want to be able to take that information and give it to another provider should they need to without having to go the way I used to go. I'd walk over to the healthcare center. I'd hand them my $3 for Xeroxing. They'd Xerox 20 or 30 pages of my medical record. I'd stuff it in my suitcase and I'd go to the next provider. That just doesn't happen anymore. Digital health is changing the way that doctors and patients interact. I actually most recently, a primary care provider who I did not choose to work with, walk in an office. I was handed an iPad. I filled out all of my pertinent information on that iPad. First thing I did was look at that iPad and see everybody else's fingerprints on that and thought that it was probably not a very clean item to be passing from one sick patient to another. I took the iPad, gave it back. The nurse came in, or the medical assistant came in, and they did a digital weight, which was wirelessly transmitted, heaven knows where, because certainly most women don't like to have their weights all over the place. Nor men do, I guess. They took my blood pressure, same thing, wireless devices. This was a very high-tech office. I went in and I sat down, and the medical assistant came up and asked me a series of questions, and she also had some sort of a portable laptop device in which she was entering the answers. And then the primary care provider came in with the laptop in front of her face, looked down, never even looked up at me, assumed that Robin was a male name and said, "So, sir, how are you doing today?" I realized how impersonal all of this had become. But this is the way of the future. This is the way of the future. And cybersecurity and healthcare specialists are particularly designed to deal with these kind of entities. New technologies allow patients to track their own health record and allow them to generate data. How many of you know about the diabetes apps that are available for the iPhone? Sadly, yes. They're amazing, and they're not. I mean, for people that have diabetes, they're wonderful because you basically can track your own blood sugars. You can send it to your provider. Things that were very difficult to do in the past. Health information exchanges are being created to have additional access to all of the electronic medical records. About 46% of health entities are now electing to participate in these, and a lot of them are also electing out. They're not very interested in it. I had the most wonderful time. I met a gentleman, a doctor who owns something called the World Clinic. And the World Clinic, of all places, is headquartered in New London, New Hampshire, which is, if any of you know New Hampshire, it's a tiny little rural town. You would never expect this wonderful organization to be located there. And about 5 years ago, the physician who started this World Clinic was interviewed on the Today Show, and it got all kinds of wonderful, wonderful press. And his medical model was so unique to the times. It's now fairly mainstream, but his medical model was that he didn't accept any insurance payments. He was going to be, with 3 other doctors, the providers to the rich and famous that traveled the world. If you were a prince and you had a castle on some remote island in the Caribbean, this was the guy for you. If you were an extreme sports person and you wanted to go to the Andes and you wanted to hang glide, this was the doc for you. You paid a flat fee. He's still in business, and any of you can Google World Clinic. It's a pretty interesting concept. You paid a flat fee. It was all a la carte. You decided whether or not you wanted 24-hour care, whether or not you wanted care when you were just traveling, or whether or not you wanted to actually see him in person at some point in time. And based on your level of commitment, you were given a little handheld suitcase. And that handheld suitcase had a satellite phone and some transmitters and some wireless blood pressure cuffs and all kinds of medical IT equipment. And what would happen is if I was hang gliding in the Andes and I got into an accident, I could treat myself. I could upload this data to the people at the World Clinic. They could actually see me. They could see the data. They could decide what to do. If I had enough stuff in my little medical kit, depending upon what sport I was doing, to maybe splint myself. And then, indeed, they would get on a plane, come down, and meet you at a hospital. Pretty amazing concept. But it's happening now. It's happening in the mainstream. I can sit in my own house and I can monitor my diabetes if I had diabetes. I can sit in my own house. I can take a snapshot of something that looks very suspect on me, and I can send it to a dermatologist. That's new. That's very new. The only problem is most of that data is not protected. Now, the reason that we actually have an entire program in healthcare IT is because healthcare is very complex. The structure is incredibly unique and ebbing and flowing and constantly changing. You have large mega hospitals. You have small, tiny critical access hospitals that have 25 beds. You have hospitals that have 100 different departments. You have hospitals that have 3 departments and a nursing home attached to it. There is a huge variety of different structures in these different entities. Huge variety of personnel. You have billing people, you have coding people, you have pharmacy individuals, you have doctors, and you have providers at many different levels. You have medical doctors, MDs, you have doctors of osteopathic medicine, you have nurse practitioners that have to have all of their notes signed off on by another doctor, you have physician's assistants whose medical records, in order for them to get paid, actually have to be authenticated by another provider. You have laboratory people, you have physical therapy people, I can go on, and most of you know all of the different types of people in a healthcare structure. And you also have regulation. How many of you have heard of HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability Act? Most of us have. There are other regulations that are coming down the pipe, but that's the entity that most of these healthcare institutions fear the most because of the huge fines that can be levied, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. You have electronic medical health records, EHRs, which contain all of the information about your own health. You also have PHRs, personal health records, which really can be anything. They can be a combination of your electronic medical health record and things that you do outside. For example, I'm a triathlete. I can keep all of my oxygen levels and my heart rate monitor levels in my personal health record if I choose to do that, which is different than an electronic health record. We have e-prescribing. E-prescribing is pretty amazing. It's magic. It's pretty much done away with that old prescription pad, which was so darn tough for the law enforcement people to regulate because they'd get stolen, people would write names on them. E-prescribing is wonderful, but it's done usually via a fax machine in many cases. You have e-health tools like these monitors that can monitor your heart rate, that can monitor your percent of oxygen. And you have online communities to deal with. Online communities like all women that have breast cancer, or all people that have sickle cell anemia. All of these things need to be managed and understood in order to be able to provide the information, whether it be hardware, software, plans, in order to protect this data. Now, the term health information technology is a very broad concept. Sorry, I transited this over and it broke that apart. But, and it has anything to do with things that analyze healthcare. So it is a huge, complex engine that runs that at this point is not very secure because it's never really had to be. All right. Healthcare is prone to cyber attacks. We know that. There was recently a study done. This is a 2014 study in which the participants, and there were 80 entities that participated in this study. They were interviewed a total of 328 times. 94% of them had been breached. 94%. The health industry is being targeted at an alarming rate, and it is increasing every single day. Now, hospitals are supposed to continue to increase in the number of breaches. The different types of breaches between 2009 and 2013 were such a variety. A breach could be anything that could possibly leak any sort of personal health information. Breaches from theft of computer equipment, computers that are left in cars, theft of medical records by a disgruntled employee, loss. Doctors are not very good at holding on to items sometimes. You'll lose an iPad in the middle of Walmart. That is considered to be a loss. Improper disposal has been a huge problem. Improper disposal of even computers. Taking those wonderful bring your device to work, iPad, and deciding you don't need it anymore and you'll give it to your 13-year-old son. Postal records, we don't even think about that. How many of you have gotten a healthcare record by post? Yeah, okay. I do too. I still get it. They'll still send me lab results in the mail. How do we know really when it was sent and when it ever got there? And I've got to tell you, as a medical practice manager for a number of years, I used to receive fax reports from insurance company and other providers that had nothing to do with any patients that we had on board at the medical practice at all, and that's considered a breach. So, can you do the next slide? My slide, please. Perfect. Okay, just lost or stolen data is one thing that an awful lot of breaches take place, and these are the different hospital departments that get affected. There is not one department in a hospital that is not affected by lost or stolen data. Scheduling, prescription pads, payment details, billing, insurance records, medical files. When we think of healthcare breaches, most of the time we think about leaking personal health information about us. We don't realize that a lot of these other departments have the ability to leak things, even if it is just a scheduling detail, when I'm going to happen to be at that practice. That is considered a PHI infraction. Okay, now, can you hit the button again? Sorry. Okay, medical devices. This is one of the absolute most astounding things to me. Researchers found approximately 50,000 malicious events and over 700 malicious source IP addresses that can compromise these medical devices. And the devices included anything from imaging, firewalls, web cameras, mail servers, you name it. Medical device manufacturers expect the healthcare institutions and the hospitals to protect these devices. They expect that the healthcare institution is going to put in place things that will protect these devices from being hacked. Healthcare institutions say, we're not doing that. That's not our responsibility. This is crazy. Yeah. Oh, sure. But you know, yep. The hospital executives, the administration are saying, the IT people are saying, we don't want to have anything to do with protecting these devices. That should be on the medical device manufacturer. You should build in some sort of security into this particular device. So there's a huge war going on. But unfortunately, it's the patients that are being harmed by this. You got to hit this next one a few times. Okay, keep going. All right, this is an operating room. And if you look at these things, that's a heart-lung pump. Timing devices all have IP addresses, X-ray equipment, and even oxygen masks on human beings. Each one of these things has a unique IP address. Pacemakers, hip implants, you name it, you can not only be possibly hacked, but you can be tracked. Think about it. Every single time you go to that doctor and something is done, it's usually done with a device that could be hacked. All right, now, this is just some of the numbers, and I'm not going to go over all of them because it would take forever. But the reality is, in 2013, about 7 million patient health records were breached. And how many of these do we actually hear about? Not very. We hear about Target. We hear about Walmart, because maybe our credit card information has been put out there. But how many people might know my weight? 7 million breaches. That's definitely coming from, yeah. 22% of those breaches resulted in unauthorized access. I'm going to talk to you in a minute about how these breaches can occur, and you're going to find one kind of common thread in this. Now, in July, Community Health Systems, which is this huge, huge conglomerate, it's actually a Fortune 500 company, 207 hospitals in 29 states with about 31,000 licensed hospital beds, was breached. A cyber attack netted 4.5 million records from this hospital. 4.5 million records. How many of you heard about this? I didn't hear about this. This is a very costly thing to this healthcare institution, but not nearly as costly as it should have been had it been put on the front page of the New York Times, because then probably nobody would go there. Variety of things. In most cases, they take pieces of it. They take your name, your telephone number, your credit card number. They don't really care if your glucose is 500, for example. It's more, it's usually motivated by money. Your weight is fairly safe. Go ahead. Because I live in New Hampshire, and the largest healthcare institution, and the one you actually might know here, is Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center. Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center is a huge hospital. It actually has its own zip code now. It's gotten so big. And it really services the entire New Hampshire and Vermont area. And on January 20th of 2014, it actually had a breach. Ooh, I can't believe I got a copy of this letter. And it breached 12 New Hampshire resident records. Wow. This was huge. This was huge in New Hampshire because Dartmouth hadn't had a breach before that. Can you go on to the next slide? And most interestingly enough, the follow-up letter was that personal information is very important to DHMC, and that they are going to continue to monitor and implement further security awareness for employees. This was a case where an employee had misplaced a laptop. That's all it took to get this to happen. And this was terrible press for this hospital. Terrible, terrible press. Now, according to the benchmark study that was done in 2012, and it continued in 2013, about 42% of breaches occurs because of an unintentional employee action. Huge. Now, there are also intentional non-malicious employee actions. And you ask me, what is intentional and non-malicious? Intentional is something like giving your password to somebody else. You don't mean any harm. I'm just trying to help you. But you can then get into my records and view things that you shouldn't do. So a lot, over 41% of these breaches are caused by employees. So what we have been doing as a college is really focusing on how we can educate employees at some of these healthcare institutions through this particular program, because that really is going to chip away at this particular problem. Here's a whole bunch of statistics, and you can read this at some other point in time, because We know that it's a problem, and we know that it is a very costly problem to these healthcare institutions, and I'm going to go over a scenario of cost in a second. But if we can knock out about 42% of the breaches just by educating our own employees, then we are going to make a difference in these particular numbers. I went into a hospital one day, and I actually do some per diem work in the laboratory. And I decided that I wanted to see if I could socially engineer passwords out of all of my other fellow employees that work in the lab. Because nobody really, they knew I was a cybersecurity person, but when I'm in the lab, I'm working with them. So I went in and I told them that I was doing a study and that I needed their password so I could come in and I could look at their administrative rights. Every single person in that lab gave me their password without even thinking. Such an easy thing to do. I had one of my students, unbeknownst to Dartmouth-Hitchcock Hospital, and actually I had the permission of the director of information technology. He knew this was going to happen. Walk in with an iPad and plug it in to an open port and label it with "Please leave in place IT monitoring." Sat there for a week and a half. At that point, you had access to that infrastructure. It was a wonderful example. People kept saying, well, I just walked past. It said it was part of the IT department. With the permission of the CEO of the hospital, I actually had 2 of my male students go into the hospital with a dolly and say that they were picking up a patient file. They walked in, no identification, walked up, took the filing cabinet, and got down to the first floor before anybody ever stopped them. They could have walked out with thousands of patient records. They were on their way out the door when actually nobody did stop them. They stopped themselves, and I made them pick it back. So we need to educate employees. Yep. Nope. Sorry. Yeah. That's okay. Okay. Oh. That's all right. Employees are ticking time bombs. They really are. And they're the easiest thing for you to deal with in terms of education. We all know how complex IT education is, and for me to go and to talk about firewalls with somebody is going to take a lot more time and maybe not be as high a return in terms of the final product that I want. Now, what do they cost? Do we have any idea what a healthcare breach costs? What do you think the average healthcare breach of one of the hospitals or any of the hospitals that participated in this in 1 year? Everything. Because there was a breach, all of the costs associated with that. Oh, you name it. Yep. What do you think? You think it's $600,000? $600 per record. Not too far away. Okay, go on to the next slide. More than 1 million, 31% of these hospitals, for one year, one breach. Because what happens is there are a lot of costs associated with this. It's killing me that I can't advance the slide. The average price tag is staggering. The smaller hospitals, it may be $10,000 for, like Dartmouth-Hitchcock, it was for those 12 records, it was close to $60,000 just for those 12 records. And they didn't have to do a lot of remediation for that. To more than 1 million. The average cost for the organizations over a 2-year period was $2.4 million. $2.4 million because of breaches. If you can stop 41% of those, think of the difference you're going to make in these bottom line numbers. Now, Most healthcare institutions are having breaches. If you talk to your local hospital, you're going to find out that they probably have had 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 breaches, and they just haven't let anybody know about them because they don't want to lose their reputation. 94% of the hospitals participating in the study reported that they had at least 1 breach in 2 years. 45% of these had more than 5 breaches. Now, 29% of the hospitals in the same study in 2010 reported more than 5 breaches. So you can see that this is absolutely increasing by staggering numbers. Here's the high cost of insecurity, as I call it. Let's see. You have a breach. Sometimes it's large, sometimes it's small. In most cases, people get very upset about it, regardless of the size. Normally, the first thing that happens is that the IT department's going to be blamed. Okay? No matter what, they're in trouble. They will normally bring in an outside consulting firm, and fees for that can skyrocket quickly up to about $250,000 per breach. Then they have to report the data. State and federal authorities require that in most states. The average breach is about 2,700 records at about $400 a patient. That's $10,000 right there. And then, yeah. What? $4 per patient, 2,700 patients. You're correct about that in terms of fines at the end. Yeah, and I know that California requires you to, if you've had a breach, they will fine you, and they have to do an entire investigation, which is going to cost you something at the end. I'm not so sure about all of the other states. I do know that you have to report it to state and federal authorities. No, you don't have to. I'm in New Hampshire, live free or die. That's what it says on our you know, hey, you don't even have to have anybody come and inspect your house. You can just put up your house to it. Anyway. It does. HIPAA requires that. But in most cases, the hospital administrators will say, we have got to report this to the state and federal. Which is, you know, $4 a patient doesn't seem like a lot. Unless it's 2,700 patients, and then it's a lot of money. Then you have the cost of cleanup of the mess, trying to figure out what failed, how the hackers got in, or who lost the computers, or why the disk wasn't wiped the way it was supposed to. And then you have the cost of daily disruption, because most of these places will not operate until this breach is fixed, which can result in hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then, if it has to do with personal health information, these healthcare institutions will usually do some sort of a theft monitoring on the patient, just like Target does at an approximate cost of $10 a patient. And heaven forbid if there is a class action suit against the hospital because of this. Because just the e-discovery phase can run anywhere between $250,000 to $500,000. Not to say, if you lose the lawsuit, can you imagine the millions of dollars in not only loss of reputation, loss of clients, but loss of money. And then the individual states will throw salt on the wound and say, well, hey, since you were a bad guy, I'm going to fine you too. So these are huge. Now, the cost of security is a lot easier. Educate your employees. Hire consultants to do that, cybersecurity and healthcare consultants. Encrypt your devices. A single device encryption runs around 150 bucks. You can't beat that. Even encrypting an entire enterprise system is somewhere between $250,000 and $500,000. Yeah. off of it. Yeah. Right. It's a, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now remember, an average provider has 5 breaches. So where is is this a cost-effective alternative? It's amazing. It is amazing the difference. Okay. Well, the problem is that, unfortunately, although administrators know that this is a good thing, in a lot of cases the providers could care less. And a lot of times the providers are the people that are the voting members of the particular community, so they don't budget for this kind of thing. It's this kind of almost a presentation that needs to be given to them before they actually understand that. It's like playing Russian roulette. Yeah, it is. With a fully loaded gun. That's right. So why do we need cybersecurity and healthcare specialists? We need them. Oh, you got to have sound with this.
Endless data requirements and complicated legal structures. It's next to impossible. It's so confusing and frustrating. It's no wonder most practices would rather just bury their head in the sand. And until now, they've gotten away with it because there's practically no enforcement of HIPAA regulations. But those days are over. The Department of Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights recently hired consultants to audit the HIPAA privacy and security compliance of medical practices all over the country. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Between audits like these and state-level enforcement efforts, breaches of protected health information are being discovered every day, often resulting in large fines and class action lawsuits. The average cost of one of those large breaches
is 2011.
$1.5 million, enough to bankrupt many practices, not to mention the damages to their operations and reputations. So you know you need to do something, but how do you get compliant, and where do you even start? Most IT companies know nothing about HIPAA compliance. They'll just change everybody's passwords and tell you you're fine. And hiring some consultant just to come in and point out all your problems is almost worse. They won't be able to execute solutions. It will be terrifying work. It might just make you more liable for all the things you now know are wrong. What you need is someone who understands all the technical and legal nuances of HIPAA compliance inside and out, who can actually implement all the right solutions to get and keep HIPAA compliant in the most cost-effective and sustainable way possible.
A good part of our curriculum is, A good part of our curriculum is obviously regulation and understanding regulation. The students at the college take courses in healthcare structure, they take courses in healthcare regulation, they take courses that talk about the different types of providers. We talk about emerging healthcare threats in our curriculum. We talk about the security of medical devices and what those medical devices actually do. We talk about the state of incident response, digital care, sharing information framework, challenges using the cloud, which is the huge hot topic because an awful lot of these hospitals are going to a cloud-based system. Health insurance exchange security is also up and coming, and that has a complete set of other cyber problems associated with that. So these specialists in cybersecurity and healthcare really look at these different entities in depth and are prepared to go out there in the community when they graduate in order to secure these enterprises. Now, this is the kind of thing cybersecurity and healthcare IT professionals can do. They can implement basic cyber tools. They can look at firewalls. They can look at VPNs. They can make sure that you have a secure socket layer. They can fortify authentication measures. What am I talking about? I'm losing my mind up here. You can talk about multi-factor authentication. Most hospitals have multi-factor authentication. They have cards. They have passwords. Centralized using role-based administrative access. That's huge, huge in hospitals. Most IT personnel do not design your administrative rights appropriately for the particular department. And heaven forbid, should you change roles, those normally will not be upgraded or changed. They're really good at getting rid of your rights at the end. When you leave that door and getting rid of your passwords and getting rid of your email account, but heaven forbid should you change the role. Centralized security management is huge. It should be easy to see these breaches. It should be easy to monitor them. It should be easy to audit them. Implement real-time monitoring. Most hospitals do not monitor IT security. They just don't. You would think in healthcare that some of these smaller hospitals would be hyper-vigilant about that, but that's the last place that they're putting their budgetary money right now, unfortunately. Some of the larger hospitals are starting to be a little bit smarter. You need, once you've implemented these real-time monitoring, you need somebody who's going to monitor them, and that involves additional personnel and additional money. You need to be able to report and customize the reporting so that people can actually understand what they're seeing. Yeah. At the VA. The VA is huge because the VA has cyber healthcare specialists that do this. But they're the people that are now going to really spearhead some of these other hospitals and influence them. Because even Dartmouth-Hitchcock Hospital is just beginning to do this. The smaller community hospitals have no clue. Absolutely no clue. Customize alert escalation and incident management. Make sure somebody knows when this happens. Oh my gosh, most community hospitals have an IT person that works 9 to 5. 9 to 5, is on call maybe. Nobody is really monitoring this. And install a backup system. That is huge. We all know backup, backup, backup to ensure high availability, because if we are on electronic medical record, if I go to that emergency room, I darn well don't want to have to repeat my entire medication list just because the system happens to go down. Keep an eye on the future. Be able to change. Be able to change the curriculum. Oh, go ahead. Yep. And that's what we have done with our program. So what does the future look like? And this does have audio.
Providers are getting to the breaking point. IT professionals sometimes are on the receiving end of that frustration. And so I have to be proud of them. Like, don't worry, it's going to be okay. These will be the times that tell our grandchildren about. Don't look at your position, look at your trajectory. Look at what you've done over the last 4 years. Over the next 4 years, with like safety, quality, and efficiency, you will survive. So in some ways, that email is good therapy to me.
There's one chapter that is totally private, and you oversee about 18,000 user accounts, 1,600 iPhones, 600 iPads, and spend about 20% of your day on risk, regulation, governance. Can you talk a little bit about that 20%, what it involves?
We recognize that a CIO has limited authority, like incident accountability. You have that. How do you reduce this to the point where government regulators and organizations will say, what you have done is useful? So that means I have to think about, how do I encrypt every device, whether that's an iPhone, an Android device, a laptop, here appropriate? How do I protect the data center from attacks internal and external? So much of what I have to do is meet with my business owners and ask, what are the risks, reputational risks, We're never going to be perfect. Go pick up a newspaper today, and chances are some vendor will say, oh my God, there's a new vulnerability for which no patch exists. Well, we can't put in place what I call a multi-layered defense of policy and technology to reduce risk and protect your reputation.
Now, you're really ahead of the game in your privacy industry. You have a strong and well-known for your own site encryption policy. You have very strong privacy and security policies for employees. What is one of the biggest oversights you see other industry officials making in the realm of privacy and security?
Well, I have 14 different work streams in my privacy and security efforts, so it's a little hard to just say one. Here's the thing. In healthcare, we often say, oh, I know who you are, and here's access to this and access to the other, because I know who you are, as opposed to what role is it that you play. And oh, if you're promoted, your role changes and your access changes. We should be really thinking about access based on what you do rather than who you are. We're all very good at terminating your access the moment you leave the organization, and we're all really bad at changing your access and do a well-known and well-meaning employee change roles within an organization. So that's just one. But there are, 14 that I work with.
This is an amazing man. I've actually had the pleasure of meeting him. He not only climbs mountains, but he also farms. So he really, he is one of the huge industry leaders in terms of how larger hospitals should be dealing with this. Now I'm going to torture all of you because I always, with my students at the end of a lecture, and this is you guys are students, end with a little song. So go ahead. Something that will be in your head for the rest of the day. Oh, no. Okay.